The heavyweight champion of the UFC right now is Francis Ngannou. And anytime you talk about the heavyweight title, it's special, right? It's Mike Tyson, it's Ali, it's Frazier, and all that. This
Apollo
man,
Creed.
Yes, it's Rocky. This is the closest by far that the UFC has ever come to Tyson. This man has one punch knockout power. He is straight out of a Marvel comic. He looks the part. He is chiseled. He is gigantic. He's got the knockout power, like explosive dynamite power. He's got an incredible backstory. He comes from Cameroon, had nothing to his name, moved to Paris, was sleeping in a parking lot. A guy finds him and is like, "Hey man, you should be a fighter." Brings him to his gym. He turns into the heavyweight champion, right?
Wow.
Incredible story. He beats Stipe Miocic in March of last year, the most decorated heavyweight champion in UFC history, and just completely annihilates him. In a rematch, by the way, of a fight that happened in Boston several years ago where Francis only lost to that point, didn't show up, crumbled under the pressure, comes back and annihilates him. He's the heavyweight champion. He hasn't fought since, okay? And that's very important to remember. I'm giving you the WWE like storyline breakdown, but it's all legit, okay? I hope you appreciate it.
So why hasn't he fought since?
Great question, Bill. He has been butting heads with your good friend Dana White.
Not my good friend.
He's your good friend. Okay?
No, he's not my good friend. I always support Massachusetts people, but he's been on this pod twice. That's it.
Your fellow,
I'm more loyal to your side.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. He's been butting heads. Why? He has one fight left on his contract. Now, this is how it works in the UFC. When you have one fight left on your deal and you're the UFC champion, they're going to try to resign you. Why? They don't want Bret Hart situation circa 1997 where you show up on WCW Nitro with the WWF title. They don't want Medusa situation where you show up on Nitro and drop the belt in the garbage can, right? They don't want that. So they were trying to re-sign Francis. Francis didn't like the deal that they were offering. And essentially he said, I ain't fighting for this much. So what did they do? They made an interim title fight with Ciryl Gane, who's this unbelievable up-and-coming fighter from Paris, France, undefeated, only been training for 3 years, only been fighting for 3 years, and they made it in Houston in August against a guy named Derek Lewis. Gane smokes him, and now he's the interim champion. Why do I emphasize Paris, France? Because when Francis Ngannou was training in Paris, France, Ciryl Gane was one of his training partners. And Ciryl Gane's head coach made Francis into who he is. He's the coach that saw him in the parking lot and said, hey, young man, come with me. Ciryl Gane's head coach, Fernand Lopez, is the guy who made Frankenstein. Those two guys, Francis and Fernand Lopez, the coach, they broke up. Francis moved to Las Vegas. He's no longer a part of the team. So it's now the young stud, the pupil, is going up against the guy that he built. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? They were training partners. There's stories of who got the better of who. This never happens in the UFC. There's never like divorces like this and then they actually meet for the belt, for the heavyweight title, to unify the belts. And so now you have Fernand Lopez, this coach in Paris, taking this young guy who he says is better than Francis, who I also created. And you have Francis who's like, hold up, I'm not the same dude that was back in France back in the day, and I'm going to prove to you guys that I'm the man. Okay, that's a great story. That's the story the UFC is selling you right now. The story that we are selling you as the media and telling you the truth about is that this is the last fight on Francis's contract. So here's what happens. Francis Ngannou and his manager have said, December 31st, 2022, our contract is up. Usually there's a thing called the Champions Clause. When you're the champion, it will kick in to keep you around so that you can walk out and go fight for Bellator. They're saying our term is up. We signed a 5-year deal. We're done, regardless of if we're champion or not. If he loses on Saturday, and if he loses some crazy decision, like a split decision, and he gets robbed, he's a free agent. Come Saturday night after this fight, the moment this fight is over, he can walk away and fight for someone else. We've never seen that before. If he wins on Saturday night, he said, I'm not fighting for the rest of the year. I'm going to either sit out, you're going to pay me more, or I'm becoming a free agent come December 31st. That's never happened. A champion has never been able to walk out of the UFC with the belt. So do you understand these stakes? This is crazy stuff. And this is why, Francis is the underdog, which is rare as champion going into the fight. He's the betting underdog because people think there's a lot going on in his life. There's too much pressure, all this drama with the UFC, blah, blah, blah. Plus he's fighting his former coach, right? So the coach knows how to beat him, you would presume. Plus he's fighting this young upstart guy, Ciryl Gane, who I could assure you the UFC wants to win because they don't want the headache of Francis if he wins and all the leverage he's going to get. Like this is straight, like Vince himself couldn't write a better script than this. For the heavyweight title, I think the Packers are playing on Saturday. This is infinitely more drama than that game.
Well, the way you laid that out, it almost makes it seem like he's better off I mean, not obviously losing, but like getting disqualified, so he gets, and then he could immediately make way more money somewhere else.
That's
right?
The thing. What if he knees him while he's down, which is a DQ?
Yeah,
that's an L, and then walks.
And then
out.
He's out. So anything's at play. He's not going to do that. I was stunned when I looked at the lines. He's plus 122. When was the last time he lost?
The last time he lost was so he has a loss to Derek Lewis in July of 2018, but it was a nothing fight. Both guys didn't show up. Like, not a single punch was thrown. Legitimately, the last time he lost, in my opinion, was the Stipe fight in Boston in 2000 UFC 220. So it was like January of 2018 was the last time he lost. And they honestly, one of the biggest missteps in UFC is like, look, this is what drives me nuts about my relationship with the UFC. Did I not sell you on that fight? Do you not want to watch that fight right now? Are you not all in? Right? I'm selling you the fight. I'm doing a better job of promoting the product than they are. However, I will also tell you, one of the worst jobs of promotion that they've ever done is what they've done with Francis. This guy is a promoter's dream. He is the closest thing that they've ever had to Mike Tyson. If you can't get this guy on board and make money off this guy, you don't know what you're doing. And so because they're
How much is that COVID related though? Because I feel like the last 2 years, they've lost their fastball a little bit with the promotion stuff.
You want to know what it's really...
what is it? Tell us.
They won the race. 2016, they sold for $4.025 billion. And usually when you sell for that much, you don't stick around and still right the ship. It's a new owner that comes in. But who's the guy?
Well, and they got the ESPN contract too. But I thought they had the new ESPN contract that, they were going to try to renegotiate or something. I thought they had incentive to try to hold up because they're carrying ESPN Plus.
In fact, the ESPN deal in terms of motivation is a gift and a curse. It's more money than they've ever gotten, but ESPN bought the exclusive rights to the pay-per-view. So now the UFC is making a fixed amount, regardless of if this sells a single pay-per-view or 2 million pay-per-views.
So there's no carrot for them. So that's why they don't care if Ngannou is even fighting for 9 months, because it's not like there's tremendous amount of money at stake. They're already getting the money.
You nailed it. And that's why when Conor was going head to head with them and was just basically like begging for a fight, they're like, yeah, let's chill until the fans could come back, because they didn't need it. They're like, ESPN was, as long as they met their X amount of dates, 43 shows, and then the 12 to 13 pay-per-views, they're good. ESPN's paying up front. So in fact, it's more incumbent upon ESPN to promote this as an entity. And that was kind of the thing that I would always be told, we got to promote this, we got to promote that. And I was like, do you guys tell Woj to promote like the Saturday night game? Like, it's not my job to promote. My job is to cover and to talk, but I promote. Like, you want me to put up a link to sell the pay-per-views? That's not my job. So it's more on them to do that than the UFC at this point.
ESPN would tell you needed to promote the pay-per-views? That's so weird.
It was extremely uncomfortable. Oh, by the way, promote the pay-per-views of the guys that don't like me, that treat me like crap. Like, what is it? Why? Like, again, I would argue through my work and the hours upon hours that I spent talking about this crazy sport, that's promotion. There's direct promotion and indirect. But yes, I would always have to post the link to the pay-per-view, be told to promote. Yes. It was very
surprising. Well, that also shows you how important it is financially to ESPN, because again, I think it's by far carrying their ESPN Plus. Now they've added
1,000%.
They have a lot of stuff. They're doing a lot of like small deals that I think add up. Like any college, that if you went to any college, basically anywhere in basketball, you can go find your team. And they've done some cool high school stuff, but it's the big ticket. I mean, I'm sure.
And it's the only one that they have
too. Peacock, what did they bring in? Like 1.1 or 1.2 million people for Peacock. That's just are people Peacock wouldn't have normally. So.
And it's the only entity that they have that they're actually selling on pay-per-view, right? Like, obviously these games are great, but that's just the $4.99 or $5.99 to get Plus. Now it's the Plus price tag and then pay-per-view. By the way, they just hiked the price up of the pay-per-views. It's now $75, and that pissed off everyone. By the way, in the NBA, I'm an NBA fan, of course. When they upped the TV deal. Do you remember that whole story? And then they upped the salary cap, and then the Warriors were able to get Kevin Durant.
Yeah,
remember that story?
Oh yeah.
What do you think the purses got upped when they upped the pay-per-view price as well? Do you think the fighters are making more now?
Well, they have. So they remind me of WWE in the 2000s after they extinguished everybody. When you don't have competition, sometimes that's the worst thing in the world. And if the talent, like WWE had that nice talent boom 2010-11 range with the CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, a lot of those guys. And they were able to ride that. Roman Reigns comes in, Seth Rollins, and all of a sudden they had this new wave of people. But for the most part, they didn't have any challengers. And I think that's why it's been so interesting to watch with what's happened with AEW, where AEW is kind of, they're not beating WWE. And I think it's good that we have two healthy places at this point, but they've kind of zagged in directions that I think were things that people who like the WWE have been frustrated by. Why do you always go after these big monster guys over like the pure wrestlers? Why don't you tell story better? Why don't you sell, the up and coming? Why don't you build younger people? All these things. And AEW is like, cool, we'll take this guy. We'll take that guy. We'll triple down on storytelling. We'll just care about having like the most awesome 35-minute match over just trying to fill a giant stadium. And, for the first time, WWE, I think, has had to get a little more creative. I don't see that from UFC at all. Who is even challenging them?
There's a group called Bellator that's owned by Viacom. They're
they've
on
been
Showtime.
15, 16 years.
Yeah. It's, I will say the second half of 2021 was good for them. But again, it's not like, okay, Francis. Francis is the perfect example. Oh, Francis is a free agent. Is he going to go to Bellator? Who's there for him to fight? Here's the sad state of affairs in MMA. There's actually 4 massive free agents, and free agency is still like, we're still in the leather helmet days of this sport. Revenue sharing, all that stuff is non-existent. But there's actually the potential for 4 massive names that I can assure you've heard of to become free agents in 2022. Francis Ngannou, Israel Adesanya, Nathan Diaz, and Conor McGregor. You've heard of those 4 guys. Conor only has 2 fights left on his deal. So there's a world where he could be like, I'm fighting these out and I'm going to go test free agency. You know what's the crazy thing about all 4 of those guys? The biggest money that they can make isn't even in MMA. It's in boxing. It's in these Jake Paul fights.
It's like fighting anybody with the last name Paul.
That's the crazy. It's kind of sad that they can't go to another promotion like the WWE AEW example that you gave, which is perfect. It's actually to go do these one-off boxing matches, which proves that yes, the Bellators of the world, the PFLs of the world, like these guys need to do a little better job of nipping at their heels.
So Francis's best job to just make a crazy amount of money would be fighting Jake Paul, but his left arm is tied to his leg.
No, so Francis actually has a great
or he's slightly drugged.
He's too big for Jake. That would be crazy. But Tyson Fury and Francis have been going back and forth. And that would be
Tyson's 280 pounds. That actually, he could handle the size at least a little bit.
Could you imagine the spectacle of like, we are going to find out truly once and for all who the baddest man on the planet is? Is it the boxing heavyweight champion of the world or the MMA heavyweight champion of the world, right? That's a great promotion. I mean, that sells itself. Francis has always wanted to box. Tyson is actually playing this game. Like he's actually flirting. And you know what actually could help this? Top Rank, which is who Tyson fights for, and UFC are both under the ESPN umbrella. And I could see a scenario where Jimmy Pitaro is like, hey, now Bob Arum and Dana White hate each other, but Todd DeBuff, who also is his son-in-law and is pretty much running Top Rank at this point, and Dana are on pretty good terms. Hey, Jimmy Pitaro's like, Dana, Todd, let's figure this out. One night only, $120 on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. We're going to see who's the true baddest man on the planet. I actually see that if Francis wins, I think this could be a part of the negotiation.
Or plan B, Francis has an arm tied behind his back, fighting Jake Paul and Logan Paul back to back. One arm.
That would be
Who's favored in that? He'd have to be both of them.
Honestly, Jake isn't that bad. Jake isn't as bad.
I think he throws I like his right overhand.
Yeah, he's not as bad as people want to convince themselves. I mean, Francis is just an absolute beast.
Francis after 6 drinks versus Jake Paul. You'd actually have to see him finish the drinks.
I might go with Jake Paul to the body. I mean, the one thing is like Francis is an MMA fighter. Jake is a boxer. I know people will cringe at that, but like he's training truly in boxing. Yeah. As we've learned over the past year with Woodley and Askren, like it's not the same sport. Like you could throw, but it's a different kind of boxing when you're an MMA fighter.
So if this was normal circumstances with Francis, would he be the underdog, or is this all about the circumstance and the layoff?
It's an incredible concoction. I think what's truly making him the underdog is the fact that Gane is really good. He's really young. He's very athletic. He's got better cardio. Cardio has always been Francis's Achilles heel. And I think the fact that he has the coach who built Francis into who he is, and you would think knows his strengths and weaknesses, and the fact that they've actually sparred together, a lot of people are thinking like, hey, this is the recipe to beat this guy. Now, I would also say historically, there are two things that come into play. Number one, we have seen situations historically in MMA where there's a young upstart that comes like a freaking rocket and stumbles when he gets to his first title fight. It happened to Francis against Stipe. It happened to George St. Pierre famously against Matt Hughes back in the day. And then they dust themselves off and they figure it out and then they win the belt. So that could happen here. The other thing that worries me, and I don't know what it is, anytime someone goes head to head against the UFC, they battle with them, they try to play this game of poker, the freaking house always wins. It's amazing. They always win. The UFC always wins. So this game
the
of
blackjack dealer at 3 a.m.
Yes. So, historically, the house always wins. But man, I cannot. Francis has looked so good and looked really good in his last fight against Stipe, especially his takedown defense was improved. I don't feel comfortable, especially at those odds. Like, this is no chump. I don't feel comfortable telling you, like, hey, he's not going to win, because I actually think there's a chance he's going to win.